I am really hoping that it's not too late to start talking about the International Booker Prize longlist. But if I have missed the boat, well, it's too late to be too late because I have not got another video planned. Hi, I'm Ben, welcome back to my channel, where today I have probably my most prepared for and least prepared for video simultaneously, because on the one hand I've not scripted anything I'm going to say today, which quite frankly terrifies me, but on the other hand I've done some arts and crafts, because I thought a fun way to get to know the International Booker longlist is to read and rank all of its 13 books' first sentences. Before we get into that though, I thought it would be good just to share some high-level thoughts about the long list that was announced just a couple of weeks ago. I am very late to this because we are probably closer to the shortlist announcement now than we are to the long list announcement, but hey, with a bit of time our thoughts mature like a fine wine, but hopefully not like a smelly cheese. I think my overall feelings around the International Booker Prize long list is kind of similar to my Women's Prize long list feelings, the fiction long list that is, but in reverse. With the Women's Prize, I was a little bit skeptical when I first saw the long list announcement. I wasn't too sure about some of the books. There seemed to be a lot of really random choices, but the more that I've learned about the books, the more that I've really warmed up to the list, and I'm quite excited about reading some of the long-listed titles. On the other hand, with the International Booker, I was actually quite excited by the list that we got, but the more that I've read about these books and the more that I've learned about them from other people that have been reading them and reviewing them, the less I'm really interested in them. It does seem potentially like a little bit of a weak year for the prize, and even some of the books that I have picked up as a result of their nomination, I may be regretting getting my mitts on them. One of the things I think that disappoints me most about the list is the lack of geographic diversity. It's a very, very Europe heavy list. 8 of the 13 books are from European countries, 4 are from Latin America, and then there's only one book from outside of those two regions, which is the one from Southeast Asia. I think the International Booker has such a wide scope and remit to shine a light on books from regions that we don't normally read, and it's a shame not to have that reflected in the list that we got. On the other hand though, I guess the thematic diversity seems a little bit better than last year, which was very heavily dominated by motherhood. This year there seems to be a lot about memory and character and how that intertwines with history from these different countries, which seems quite interesting to me. There are also quite a few rural focused tales, which I think in modern publishing we don't get tons of, although that might just be the books that I see come up on like my Instagram feed and on BookTube. The other thing that stands out to me about this list is that it is full to the brim with very short books. So most of the ones that are on the list come in around the 200 page mark. The International Booker does tend to have very tight timelines. The shortlist is announced very quickly after the long list, but because the books are so short, it makes it quite doable. I've not even attempted to try and read the whole long list. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do about the shortlist, but there are some books that I'm interested in. Finally, I can't really talk about this list without revisiting my predictions to see how I did. I did only get 2 books correct, and interestingly, they both came from my reserved spots category. Those were The Chunkster, which was Matatu 10, and The Rule Bender, which was Gabriella Vina's auto-fiction, non-fiction-y Undiscovered. The big shock here though is that the reserve spot that wasn't filled was the Fitzcarraldo, and Fitzcarraldo have been a very reliable staple on the list for a number of years now, and not seeing one of those little blue books on the final long list was quite the surprise. Right, let's get into some first sentence ranking. What I've got here are a couple of books that I have picked up from indie bookshops, plus a few that I've got from the library, and then for the rest I have got samples on my Kindle, so I'm going to read them that way. I'm going to go through these books in alphabetical order by author surname, so that means first up is Selva Almada's Not a River. This is one of the Latin American books on the list. Selva Almada is from Argentina, I think. This is published by Chago Press, who have also been pretty successful with the International Booker, so it's not a huge surprise to see one of their books on the list. I'm not going to do in-depth synopses of all of these books because I just can't be bothered, but I believe this one is about some dudes on a boat, shit's going down, they're revisiting their past, some things have happened in the past that affect the present and may affect the future. It's 3 men in a boat, but not a comedy. Let us read the first sentence. Inero Ray, standing firm on the boat, stocky and beardless, swollen-bellied, legs astride, stares hard at the surface of the river and waits, revolver in hand. Ooh, that's a really good first sentence. That's really good because it's straight into the action. We're introduced to a character, his physical presence, which we assume says a lot about what's happened, and potentially about his personality and character as well. But there's loads of intrigue. Why has he got the gun? Who's he pointing at? Who's under the water? Is it a person? Is it some sort of animal that they're being attacked by? That really makes me want to read on. So I don't think you can ask much more from a first sentence than that. I'm also intrigued by the name of the character. So I think enero means January in Spanish. So I wonder if there's something about this character that means that they're like embodying January and looking backwards and forwards. And Ray is king, so does that put them in a position of like grace? But it's possible that I'm reading too much into that, because if there was a character called January King in an English language novel, I may not be overanalyzing that too much. I think I'm just a little bit excited that I know 2 Spanish words. Anyway, we must place this on the board, and this is going to go straight in at number 1. And not just because it is the only book that I'm placing. It genuinely deserves to be in number 1. Good start, Selva Almada. Next up, we have Simpatía by Rodrigo Blanco Calderón. Calderón is from Venezuela, so this is also translated from Spanish. This is by Noel Hernández González and Daniel Hahn. I do love that 2 out of 2 books so far have had the translators' names on the cover. Well done, everyone involved. This is one that I bought because I loved the concept of it. It's about a man whose wife leaves him, and then he goes about setting up like a shelter for dogs. And I'll be honest, I just love dogs. If I have one gripe with the publishing industry, it's that there are too many books with cats on the covers and not enough books with dogs on the covers. Now this dog is quite blurry, and in its reflection it's quite pixelated, but I'll take it because there are not enough dog covers. Didn't really mean for this to turn into a dog-based rant. Let's read the first sentence. On the day his wife left the country, Ulysses Can decided to get himself a dog. I like that. It's nice. It's not blowing me away. Like, I'm not wowed and wanting to read on. My feelings may be a little bit polluted by the fact that from people I have seen who have reviewed this one, it's not actually that good and it's got a lot of bad sex scenes in it. But still, I think it's a serviceable first sentence. I am intrigued about why his wife has left him. I want to know more about the dog, obviously. But it is not as good as the Selva Almada sentence. So this is going to go into second place, I think, for now, but I don't fully expect it to stay there for very long. If it does stay there, well, we've got a bunch of crap first sentences to come. The third book we're going to talk about is Jenny Erpenbeck's Kairos. Erpenbeck is a German author, and I'm kind of familiar with her because I do own another of her books, which has a very similar premise to Kate Atkinson's Life After Life, but I cannot remember for the life of me what that book is called. Oh, I think it is on here. 1 second. It's The End of Days. Kairos, though, is her latest novel. I believe it tells the story of, I think, a younger woman and an older man and a toxic relationship between the two of them. And it's told somewhat in tandem with the story of the fall of the Berlin Wall. But I'm not 100% on that. So if I have got that wrong, please do correct me in the comments. I don't know 100% how interested I am in this one, but let's see if the first sentence hooks me. Here we go. Will you come to my funeral? So I am not clear if that is speech or not. It does sound like dialogue, but it's not got quotation marks. And I don't know if this is one of those books that doesn't have quotation marks and you infer which parts are speech and which parts are not just from context. I guess I'm slightly intrigued by, like, is this a hypothetical question that someone asks of a loved one when they're being a little bit silly or a little bit manipulative, or is this person actually dying and they're planning their funeral and they want to know if their person they're speaking to is going to come, or is the narrator talking to us and somehow breaking the fourth wall? I think that's all like slightly interesting, but I'm not fully gripped by that sentence. I think it's probably my least favourite so far, so I'm gonna put that in third place for now. Next up is The Details by Ia Genberg. This is translated from Swedish by Kira Josefsson. Or would it be Josefsson? I'm not too sure how Swedes pronounce their J's. This is a book that feels super short to me because not only is it only about 150 pages long, but the font is really quite big, although I have opened on a wall of text here, which is my worst nightmare. I believe this is all about a woman reflecting on a number of different people in her life who have had a profound impact on her, and it's all about memory and recalling the details, general stuff like that. Here is the first sentence of this book. This is from the chapter titled Johanna, or Johanna. After a few days of the virus in my body, I come down with a fever, which is followed by an urge to return to a particular novel. Again, I'm not like blown away by that. My mind immediately wonders if this is a COVID novel and that the virus is COVID, or if it's just like generic virus that is supposed to tell us that she's not very well. I would like to know what the novel is, because I think that could signify to me whether this is a book that is too clever for me. Like if it's some really clever, obscure writer who she's going to obsess over for the whole book, then maybe this is one that I'm not going to get on with brilliantly. But if it's a book that I can relate to or think about myself a little bit, something that I've read maybe, then that would be of more interest to me. I don't know, I think these first sentences are getting worse. This might be my least favourite one so far, so I'm going to put the details in at 4th place. Let's hope this trend does not continue, because I don't want to be reading absolute dross by the time we get to number 13. Next is the book White Nights by Urszula Honek. This is translated from Polish by Kate Webster, and this is from a tiny little independent press called MTO Press. I ordered it directly from them because I think when I learn about a new press that's doing something quite cool, I do like the idea of supporting them, and this way they don't have to pay like a middleman for the privilege of selling their book. And I tell you what, these are absolutely beautiful objects. I really like their house style. 2 things I love about it. One is like the black and white image on the front, and the way that it's framed is really, really pretty. But also I just love that it's got the original language title on the front as well as the translator's name. Just a very well made book. I'll be back for more, I'm sure. This is a set of interconnected stories. It's all set in Poland, in a village, and I think they're all told from the perspectives of different characters. I understand it's quite hard-hitting and brutal, and people really struggle and suffer in these stories. But I am a glutton for punishment when it's done well. Let's read the first page, not the first page, I'm not reading the whole page to you. Let's read the first sentence of the first story. A house like a chicken coop, so that if you leaned on it or kicked at it, all the planks would fall to the ground and some would break in half, everything rotten. Ooh, I really like that. I don't know what this like linguistic or grammatical device is, but I like the way it's not saying the house was like a chicken coop. It says a house like a chicken coop. It feels like it's painting an image more than telling a story, and I think that is very enticing. I like the picture it's painting of decay, the immediate feeling of place that I'm getting. It definitely makes me want to read on. I think that could be my second favourite so far, because I don't think it beats Not a River. Does it? No, there was so much tension in that first sentence, so I think it's not quite as good as that. But I'm going to put it up in second place. So all of these ones need to shift over, and White Nights can go into position number 2. Next up is Matter 210 by Hwang Sok-yong, and this is translated from Korean by Sora Kim-Russel and Youngjae Josephine. This is one of the 2 books that I did predict, and it's also one of the 2 longer books on the list. This is a big sweeping historical fiction of Korea about lots of generations and their intertwining stories. I'll be honest, I'm not massively sure how interested I am in reading this. It feels like quite a big investment of time and brain energy, although it has come highly recommended by a few reviewers that I trust. So who knows, if it makes the shortlist, maybe I'll take a dive into it. Let's check out the first sentence. Yi Jino set up his toilet on the opposite side of the catwalk, as far away from his tent as possible. I'm not loving that. Do we need to know about toilets in the very first sentence? Do we need to know about it on page 1? I'm not convinced we do. I don't really know what catwalk means in this context though. I'm assuming not like a fashion runway, but some like walkway in a campsite or something. Who knows? I'm not pulled in by that, I'll be totally honest. Where will it go on the board? I actually think this might be my least favourite so far, because I was confused and also not very interested in the subject matter. Sorry, mater. You're going in at number 6. Next, we have A Dictator Calls by Ismail Kadare. This is the first book that does not have the translator's name on the front. Naughty, Naughty Harville Secker. This is translated from Albanian by John Hodgson. Kadare is actually quite a famous author, and I believe has been a previous recipient of the International Booker, or at least what the International Booker was before it was the prize it is today. This used to be a prize that was awarded to an author and their body of work rather than a specific novel. Kadare was one of the first winners of it, I believe, if not the very first winner. So this would be the first time that someone has won this prize twice, if you can even call them the same prize. I also think he's been a frequent close run nominee for the Nobel Prize in Literature, although I don't know how anyone knows that because the Nobel Prize nominations are not made public. Anyway, this book is a imagining of a phone call between Stalin and someone. I don't know who. Part of me wants to say this is like a Rashomon or Catch-22 style thing, but I don't think it is. I think it's more like this phone call happened, no one knows what actually went down, and this imagines a bunch of different ways that it could have gone. I've heard this is quite dense and difficult despite being actually very short. There's huge margins on these pages. There are not many words per page going on here, but maybe the margins on the meaning are very small. Let's check out the first sentence. The stop is on the right-hand side of the street. Wow, that is boring. Nope, that's going in last place. What a boring first sentence that is. Our next title is probably one of the more odd choices this year, which is The Silver Bone by Andrey Kurkov. This is another one that does not have the translator on the cover, so let me just find out who that is. This is translated from Russian by Boris Dralyuk. Kurkov is probably the most famous Ukrainian author. He was on the long list last year for that book with the guitar on the cover. I can't even remember the name of it. This is an odd choice, not because it's Kurkov, because he has previous with the prize, but because this is a mystery book. I think this is the beginning of a trilogy he is in the process of writing. I think it's like a period mystery thriller thing, which you don't normally see on the International Booker long list. Let's take a look at the first sentence. Oh, it's already been spoiled for me that this is set in 1919 because there is a map. Samson was deafened by the sound of the sabre striking his father's head. Oh, I like that. That's good. I like that it immediately sort of places you in a period. I don't think I'd know specifically what that period was if I hadn't seen the map with the date, but I know that it is old because people don't have sabres anymore unless you are rich and opening champagne like an idiot. But yeah, there's some drama, there's some tension, there's some placement in time. I really like that. But where will it go on the list? I'm not sure. Let's see. This is probably going to get harder because I'm going to have to remember what the other sentences were. I don't think I like it as much as Not a River. Although it tries to have some of the same tension, it's not quite as successful. I don't think I like it as much as White Nights, but I probably do like it more than Simpatía. So I'm going to pop it in at number 3. Next up is a book from the long list that I hadn't heard of but felt very interested in, and so I went out and bought a copy, and that is What I'd Rather Not Think About by Henty Postuma. And Postuma is a Dutch author. This was translated from Dutch by Sarah Timmer Harvey. I have actually already read this one, and spoiler alert, I quite liked it. This is about a woman who is a non-identical twin, and her brother has committed suicide. So trigger warning, if you don't want to read about suicide, I would advise you not to spend time with this book. But it's written in this really nice vignette style as she sort of recalls memories of her and her brother's relationship, which was very close, then more distant and strained at times. And I thought it was really enjoyable. But can I remember the first sentence? I actually can, which maybe bodes well for it because it's memorable, but in the interest of being accurate and getting the wording exactly right, I will read it from the book. Waterboarding, I told my mother. Although I do remember that sentence, I also remember not being super impressed by it. So I don't think this is going to fare well on the old leaderboard. The problem with that sentence is that it just doesn't give you much. It's not long enough. Like the idea of waterboarding is quite arresting, because it's obviously a very controversial thing, but there's just not enough meat to chew on there. So let's take a look at where it is going to sit. I think I like it a little bit more than the funeral one, or do I like it a little bit more than the funeral one? No, I think it's slightly worse than the funeral one, but I do like it more than the one about the virus. So it's going to slot right in at number 6. Right, we've got 4 books left. We're on to the bottom row of the board, and the next book up is Lost on Me by Veronica Raimo. Raimo is Italian, and this is translated from Italian by, bear with, Leah Yaneshko. This I understand has been quite a big commercial hit in Italy. It's a book that is not very plotty, I understand, but it's not no plot, just vibes. It's no plot, just anecdote, and it's about this really highly dysfunctional family. I'm actually quite interested in this one because it sounds like it could be a real riot, so I'm going to wait for it to come out on paperback though before I decide if I'm going to dabble or not. Let's check out the first sentence, which is, When a writer is born into a family, the family is finished, they say. I quite like that. It's a little bit poetic. It is styled like that's a quote. And I think it sets the tone for the dysfunction we're about to be let in on. I'm assuming the main character and narrator is the writer in this instance, which also makes me feel like this might be a little bit auto-fiction-y, and there's going to be this blurred line between what's real and what's invented. I'm not mad on that sort of thing and auto-fiction, but I'm not against it. Let's see where this fits in on the old board. And I'm going to have to raise it up slightly higher so that we can see the bottom row. I'm going to say it's going to go in at spot number 5. I don't think it's quite as charming as the man getting a dog after his wife leaves him, but it is better than the random funeral question. Next up, we've got the novel The House on Via Gamito by Domenico Starnone. This is translated from Italian by Una Stransky. The only thing I know about Domenico Starnone is that he is long rumoured to be the actual author behind the Elena Ferrante novels. He has strenuously denied this, I understand, but I think there was some analysis done by academics where they compared the writing style of Elena Ferrante to a bunch of other authors, and they found that there were very common similarities between Starnone's writing and Ferrante's writing, which could be because they're from similar backgrounds or similar places, but lots of people seem to believe that it is likely that Starnone wrote or was very involved in the writing of Ferrante's novels, which may turn you on to this book or turn you off depending on how you feel about Ferrante, but I know she has a lot of fans out there. This one has a very beautiful cover, and it's not really done much justice on this sort of black and white Kindle version, but this is a beautiful painting on the cover of the book, and it is soon coming out in the smaller B format paperback from Europa Edition, so I am tempted, despite the length of this one, I'm tempted to get a copy because I am really intrigued by it, and it sounds like it could be a bit of a stonking family drama. Let's check out that first line. When my father told me he hit my mother only once in 23 years of marriage, I didn't even bother replying. Ooh, I really like that. I think it tells quite a large in scope story in a very small space. You get a sense of what those 23 years must have been like for the narrator to have that attitude to that confession from the father. And then you're wondering why is the father even having this discussion with his child? I'm quite intrigued by that. I think it's a really good opening sentence, which, sadly for me, means a lot of moving post-its around on this bloody board. I'm going to say I am going to put it in 3rd place because I like it a bit better than the other father who's being hit across the head with the sabre. The penultimate book in this ranking is Crooked Plough by Itamar Vieira Jr. This is a Brazilian novel which is translated from Portuguese by Johnny Lorenz. There was a lot of Brazilian fiction in contention this year. Some really, really good stuff that people were raving about and expected to be on the list. This was the only one that made it. I don't know tons about this novel, but I think it's a rural story. It's quite an old-fashioned story. And quite a few people on Instagram in particular seem to be calling this their favourite one from the long list that they've read. Beyond that, though, I don't really know anything. And I feel bad saying this, but I'm not a huge fan of those verso covers. I didn't really like the Is Mother Dead one last year either. But let's see how the first line goes. When I opened the suitcase and took out the knife, wrapped in a grimy old rag, tied with a knot and covered in dark stains, I was just over 7 years old. Oh, that's good. That is really good. Why are there so many opening sentences with weapons? And maybe more worryingly, why am I so drawn to them? All these great sentences are reminding me of probably 2023's best first sentence, because although I have not read this book, I know that there is not a sentence out there that beats this one, which is Jesmyn Ward's Let Us Descend, which I believe the first sentence of is the first weapon I ever held was my mother's hand. Oh, so good. Anyway, we're not talking about Jesmyn Ward, we're talking about whatever this author's name is. No, but I really like that sentence. I think it is very good, but where does it factor into the ranking? I still think Not a River is kind of reigning supreme over the list because a gun, especially pointed at someone, is way more loaded with tension than a knife is. Although I am like thinking about that knife and it's already been used because it's covered in like bloody stains. And I do like the feeling of the painting of the White Knights. I think this might go in at number 3 again, which means I have to move all of these post-its. The final book from the long list that we are going to judge by its first sentence is Undiscovered by Gabriela Vina. Vina's a Peruvian author and this is translated from Spanish by Julia Sanchez. This is the other one that I had predicted would be on the list, and it's a sort of auto-fictional-ish book about Vina's own experience of dealing with and reckoning with her family's colonial past. But let's see how well that's conveyed in the very first sentence. The strangest thing about being alone here in Paris, in an anthropology museum gallery more or less beneath the Eiffel Tower, is the thought that all of these statuettes that look like me were wrenched from my country by a man whose last name I inherited. I like that. I think that really tells a compelling story and like sets the scene for what this novel's thesis is going to be, like dealing with that contradiction of your identity as a person from a certain country, but also a person whose ancestors did terrible things that affect people like you today. I think what I'm learning is that I quite like these sort of long, meandering sentences that tell you quite a lot quite quickly about what's going to happen in the book. It's not quite as arresting as some of the other ones that contain some inherent action, but I do still quite like it. Let's get it on the board and then we'll have our final order. So I think it's definitely a top 5 pick. So as I talk, I'm going to move all of these along a bit. Yeah, I don't think it's any better than the ones that have got all the weapons, basically. I'm clearly a big weapon fan. Is it better or worse than The House on Via Gamito? I think it's probably slightly better than that one. So I'm going to put it in at number 4. And here we have our final order. So number 1 is Not a River. Number 2 is White Knights. Number 3 is Crooked Plough. 4 is Undiscovered. 5 is The House on Via Gamito. 6 is The Silver Bone. 7 is Simpatía. 8 is Lost on Me. 9 is Kairos. 10 is What I'd Rather Not Think About. 11 is The Details. Meta 210 is number 12. And the final book is A Dictator Calls. One thing I think I've learned from this is that the judges must have read the whole books because some of these first sentences are absolute stinkers. You would not put those books on a prize long list based on those sentences. I'll also be interested to see if these first 6 end up being the shortlist, because if that does happen, then we know next year we don't need to read the whole books. We can just read the first sentences, put them in order, and we'll have our shortlist. Well, I rather enjoyed doing that. I thought it was a little bit of fun. I hope you enjoyed it too. If you did, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more from my channel and you're not subscribed, then hit the subscribe button and I publish a new video more or less once a week. Do let me know in the comments if any of those first sentences were like stand out amazing to you, or if you've read any of these books and the first sentences really don't represent what is to come for the rest of the novel. I would be really interested to know. But until next time, toodles.